Setting boundaries can be super tricky with our children or with the people that we're caring for. Here's 5 ways that we can make that a lot easier. Let's go. All right, so the first thing that we want to be doing is we want to make these seamless. There's a nice little pun there, but we're going for seamless. We want to make sure that we're planning ahead. Whatever we're doing, if we're doing these things with our children, we want to make sure that we've let them know what's going on. We want to make sure that we've put that idea in their head beforehand. We don't want it to be a complete surprise, because if we're surprising them, we shouldn't be surprised with their complete adverse reaction. We shouldn't be surprised when they flash back out, when they don't like what's happening. If we keep them in that loop the entire time, it makes it so much easier. The next thing that we want to be doing is making sure by our planning that we make these things feel natural, feel normal. We don't want this to be that kind of kickback. We don't want it to be something that literally sets them off. If we keep this stuff natural, if we keep this stuff out in the open, if we keep this stuff rolling in nice and slowly, it is much smoother, and it's going to keep that peace in our home for much longer. If we're not surprising them, again, we're not going to be surprised with their reaction. It's going to be a lot more stable, a lot more calm, a lot easier to predict and to control. That's what we're after here. We want to bring the awareness to the issues with our children. That is the easiest way to plan ahead. That's the easiest way to avoid these issues. If we're showing them and telling them exactly what our problems are, exactly what they're doing, and how that will affect them, it's going to make all of this so much easier. It's all about being open. It's all about being honest. It's all about having that connection before we bring in any kind of correction. That is the way to completely win this parenting game. That's why these children are beating us a lot of the time. If we want it to be seamless, then all we need to do is be selling it early. We need to show them why it's a good thing. We need to show them the pain point. We need to show them what the issue is. We need to explain to them how this boundary will change and help and affect and influence and improve their lives. That's what we're doing here. We're literally selling to our children. We're selling boundaries, which is something they usually don't want. But if we can bring that in the right way, if we can carefully bring in that word in that plan and that whole conversation, this is just going to be completely seamless, completely easy, and it's going to seem like a lot less of an effort, a lot less of an issue, a lot less of a burden than it truly is going to be for them. It's that simple. We're selling to our children. We want it to seem less than it really is. There's the pun. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that these things are meaningful. If it's not meaningful, what is the point of doing it? It needs to help us, and it definitely needs to be helping them, or there is no reason, no point, no responsible way to bring in a boundary. It literally needs that reason. It's got to have that purpose. If we can't explain what that purpose is, if we can't sit down and think about why we're doing what we're doing, don't bother doing it. It is an absolute waste of time, and all it's going to do is cause stress, problems, and attitude, and just kick back from those children, which is exactly what we're missing in that first bit. We want it to be seamless. We want it to seem like less than it is. We need it to be meaningful. It has to, as I alluded to before, help the child. The whole point of boundaries is to make a safe little sandbox where these children can practice, where they can learn, where they can grow, where they're going to fall down and get a little bit bumped up, but they're not going to get hurt. They're not going to get broken. That is the point of the boundaries. We need it to be something where they're going to be safe right now and where that can just expand over time, but I'll get into that in a second. This whole thing is to be teaching our children. If we're not teaching them with this boundary, if we're not giving them that safe place to practice and play and learn and to grow, there is no point doing it. It has to be there to teach them. We have to be ready, willing, and able to be teaching them within that boundary as well. All we need to do to teach is to be the tiniest bit ahead of them. I've said before, all we need to do is be outside, literally on our phone, learning this thing before we come in and say it to them. As long as we're a little bit ahead, as long as we've thought this through a little bit more, we should be a lot more mature than our children in a lot or most or pretty much all areas. Why not just learn the thing and then teach them straight away? That's how we're going to learn the best as well, because teaching is the best way to learn, and it's just going to help them grow because, again, they've got someone there actually caring about them, actually teaching them, actually spending that time on them. We're there and the boundaries are there to guide them. This is there to lead them, to give them that, again, safe place to be able to move. It's like a corral for cattle. If we can be directing them in the right direction, if we can be directing them in the right path, that is all these boundaries are for. If that's not what we're using them for, we're definitely doing the wrong thing. There's definitely a way that boundaries come in to help us and to make our life easier. And again, it is just to guide and to support our child more, but I'll get into that another time. They're there to protect our children. I'll get into it right now, actually. These boundaries are there to protect our children, even if that's protecting them from ourselves. The first boundary that I always get people to set is a boundary that's the boundary that's bothering them the most. The thing that the child's doing that's bothering them the most If we can bring in that boundary, it gives us practice, it gives the child a reason and an understanding for what the boundaries are about. It kind of seems like a nothing and a little niched nuance that the child almost can't understand, which is perfect, because if they can keep a boundary that doesn't totally make sense and we can explain how it affects us and how it hurts us and how it will kind of help them, it's perfect. If we don't bring in boundaries where the children are bothering us, we're not going to want to spend the time with them. It's that simple. That's how these things can protect them from us. If, like for me, it was chewing. I used to hear chewing at the table, chewing in my groups, chewing in my classes. It would drive me nuts. Maybe that's why teachers used to hate gum back in the day. Literally, that chewing sound used to just get to me so bad. I've worked on myself now, but I think I managed to do that by setting the boundary in my home, by setting the boundary with our child. If I didn't do that, I would have had so many negative feelings towards her. I would have had so much animosity and honestly almost hatred towards her for this sound, because it would have built up over time. If you can figure out that thing that irks you, that gets you the most, especially if it's just one main thing, bring in a boundary around that and use that to protect your child from yourself. From there, every boundary should be protecting them from a hurt, from an evil, from some kind of way that they will be damaged if they're not within that boundary. Again, otherwise, what is the point? They're to guide, they're to teach, and they're to protect. That's what boundaries are for. Third point, they need to be actual boundaries. If these boundaries don't really hurt, there's no real point. If they're not bringing some kind of constraint to the child, if they're not bringing some kind of constraint to even us in our home, what's the point of a boundary? It's not really a boundary. It's not actually doing anything. It's not binding up a wound. It's not fixing anything. It's not stopping any hurt or pain or potential hurt and pain. Why bother doing it? It has to actually hurt, because that's how we grow. If we're not hurting, we're not growing. It's just like when we injure ourselves and have a problem. I keep saying this in every video lately. When we're hurt, we need to be doing the most we can. It's not about, oh no, you've got a headache, go sit in a dark room, blah, blah, blah. It's no, you've got a headache, how much can you do? That's how we grow, that's how we improve, that's how our capacity just grows and expands. That's how to do this stuff. That's what these boundaries are for. If they're not hurting, if they're not making a bit of a bother, they're not doing what they're meant to be doing. Even if it's just to facilitate the conversation around that, then it's perfect. They're going to grow us, they're going to challenge us. They're not just going to challenge the child, they're going to grow and challenge us as well. These things are tricky to keep going. These things are hard to keep implementing. It's so hard to keep that consistency going. But if we're not doing that, if we're not all growing together, again, these things are completely pointless. There should be some struggle from us and from them. If there's not a little bit of give and take, if there's not a little bit of teething and working things out, what was the point of the boundary? It's too small of a boundary and we can just extend it straight away. That's the whole point with this, which will bring me into my next point soon. These things are going to take time at first. If they're not taking time, again, it's not really worth it. These things are going to take effort. They are going to take time to set up. They are going to be a teething process, like I've said before. These things, once they're set up though, we save time. It takes time in the beginning to set it up, but once they're set up, it's going to save us so much time. I keep saying it as well. It's one of my catchphrases. Hard now or harder later? Do you want to spend the time undoing things and redoing things later, or do you want to spend the time now getting it right, getting it done, and then moving on and making things so much easier? Here's the thing with the time. We should be having discussions. We should be planning this with them, but I'm getting ahead of myself again. 2 more points. It should save us time. That's exactly where I was. 4th point, they've got to be removable. These boundaries need to grow with our children. The whole idea, like I keep saying, is that this is a little playpen. This is a place to keep them safe. Once they've got safe and they've got competent in that realm, we extend the boundary a little bit and we see how they go with an extended boundary. If the boundary moves too much, then we can move it back in. These boundaries can move in and out, but the whole idea is to move the boundary out until it's completely gone. They're completely free. We've taught them everything that we've got to teach them. We've taught them all the new lessons that we've learned. We've got to learn and grow together. Now they're free to go and tackle the world, and in this area, they should be a lot more safe than if we didn't bring this boundary in. That's what these are for. They're to teach the disciplines that these children need to know so that as this boundary disappears, they're going to just completely smash their life, and they should hopefully be doing better than we are. They should be much, much more competent than we are because we're trying to teach them every single thing that we know. This is purely to help them with their lives. If they're not getting help with their life from this boundary, if there's not a plan in the future to make them much, much better and stronger people in their life, your boundary is pointless and way too selfish. Figure it out, make it bigger, make it grow, make it change, do whatever you need to do. But these things should be to help them with their lives, which is why we need to be able to remove them as we move. These boundaries are removed because of their age. Children are going to get older. They're going to need more freedom. They're going to need more responsibility. They're going to need more time with their friends. Once they've got a job, basically our boundaries are needing to get a lot bigger as it is. Because once they've got a job, they're how close to being an adult, basically. They're starting to do everything like an adult really early because of all the garbage that they're getting filled with. But that's a whole other point. These boundaries should fit their age and their knowledge and their wisdom, where they're actually at as a child, where they're at as a human being. Because all these people are little people. They're just a smaller version of us. Whether they're 2 or 72, people are people. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to need to learn. We're going to need to grow. That's how this works. The other thing about boundaries is if we're not growing them, we're showing that we don't really trust them. These boundaries should move with them and grow with the trust that we've got for them, grow with our knowledge of this person and understanding what they can and can't handle. That's the point of the boundaries. Keep them safe, keep them growing, keep them knowing. Boom, done. Last point, fifth, teamwork. We need to be doing these things all together. If we're coming up with these boundaries and implementing these boundaries on our own, how's it ever going to work? They're not on board from the beginning. If we can get them on board from the get-go, if we can be thinking about this and talking with them, if we can almost liaise with our own children to set these things up, that's how we smash it. That is going to be the easiest way to bring in these boundaries. Then, if we've done it with them, we can hate the boundaries as well. We can say how much we hate telling them these things, how much we hate needing to do these things, and how much better it's going to be as these boundaries move. It's back to the first point about selling them and making this completely seamless and to seem less than it really is, because that's how we're going to grow them. We want to grow them in their competency without them even realizing that it's happening. We want them to be capable and be able to show them and make them look back and realize how far they've come. That's how we completely win. All of this stuff should be, especially if we're trying to make this as a team, this should all be from, through, and to discussion. We should be able to discuss what the issue is to come up with the boundary with them. We should be able to discuss what we're going to do for the boundary and give them a chance to give us feedback. And we should definitely be able to discuss if there's a problem and how we're going to change this stuff. If it's not working, change it, do it in a discussion with them. We need to decide exactly what we're going to do. Through that discussion, we need to review exactly what we're doing with it, and as we implement it, we need to be ready to grow and move and change it with them. That's how you completely smash this stuff. That's what a smart boundary is. That's how we get them on board, and that's how we keep them safe. That's all this stuff is about. Keeping them safe, keeping them on board, keeping them growing, and making sure that we know that they're growing into a competent, great, perfect adult. It's that simple. And I'll use the word perfect because if we're giving them everything we can, we're giving them the actual tools to be able to grow and to make their own decisions and to grow their own wisdom by themselves. That's all it comes down to. Give them everything you've got and just let them go, let them grow. You've got to stand back and trust that they're going to make the right decision. And by having these boundaries, by making smart boundaries, you can definitely do that because over time, these boundaries are going to move, they're going to change, you're going to see the issues and bring in another boundary, and it's just going to get easier and easier and easier. That's all it's about. If we spend that time now, if we do the work now, we need to do so much less work later. If we can make sure that it's hard on us and hard on them now, it's going to be so much easier later. It's either hard now or hard later. If we can actually spend this time, spend the time instead of wasting our time, instead of going back over things, that is the advantage here. We're just going to keep getting better, and so are they. Give it a go. You've got this. See you later, guys.